On Early Edition at 6 tonight, a former president who owes $150 million in unpaid restitution to the state finally offers to pay up more than 16 years after being ordered to. The Joint Committee on the Gaeseong Industrial Complex holds its second round of talks. If they go well, the factories could be back up and running again before Korea's Thanksgiving holiday next week. U.S. military intervention in Syria seemed imminent. That is until Russia suggested putting the Syrian government's chemical weapons under international control. The U.S. welcomes the offer, but remains dubious about Syria's sincerity. Stay with us for these stories and more.
It is 5 a.m. in Washington, D.C., noon in Damascus, and 6 on a Tuesday evening here in Seoul. Welcome to Early Edition at 6. I'm Moon Gon-young.
And I'm Daniel Chen. Thank you for joining us. We begin with a former president who finally promises to do something he should have done a long time ago.
Where disgraced former President Chun Doo-hwan has, for a very long time, refused to pay the more than $150 million in outstanding fines levied on him for corruption during his authoritarian rule in the 1980s.
Yielding to government pressure and facing threats of arrest for illegally concealing assets on behalf of the president, his relatives have finally vowed to return the sum to the state, with his eldest son making a public apology on Tuesday.
Where Arirang News' Kim Young-gil has our top story this evening.
It has been 16 years since Korea's top court ordered former President Chun Doo-hwan to return over $200 million he amassed illegally during his dictatorship to the state. The former authoritarian president has paid only a quarter of the sum and claimed he has no money left to settle the rest. But after the government's long and drawn-out search for assets supposedly hidden by the disgraced dictator under his relatives' names, his eldest son, Chun Jae-guk, made a public apology and promised that the family will return the remainder to the state.
We sincerely apologize for causing public concern. We are also sorry for being late in resolving this issue, and my father has told us to fully cooperate with the authorities.
The younger Chun rolled out a list of family assets that would be used to pay off the fines. They include the Chun family's real estates, including the former president's whole home, highly valued artworks and stocks. The move comes after state prosecutors had confiscated nearly $83 million worth of assets held by the family. The former dictator's family will divide up over $150 million worth of fines which Chun owes to the state. Since May, the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office has led an investigation into the Chun family to search for assets they said were concealed by the family on behalf of the former president. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, discussions between the two Koreas are still ongoing as they try to reach an agreement on just when to resume operations at their jointly run factory zone in the north. The second round of talks of the Joint Committee on the Gaeseong Industrial Complex is underway in the north border town of Gaeseong, where officials are discussing a wide range of issues like the globalization of the complex, protecting the assets of investors, as well as ensuring the safety of South Korean workers.
Also beginning this Tuesday, around 30 South Korean workers will start staying overnight at the border town to conduct checkups on the facilities there. If the talks go well this Tuesday, experts say the factories in Gaeseong may start running again before the Korean Thanksgiving holiday next week.
Now, U.S. Chief Nuclear Envoy Glyn Davies, who is in Seoul on a two-day visit, says Washington remains open to dialogue with North Korea.
But only if the North takes tangible steps toward dismantling its nuclear program. Our foreign affairs correspondent Hwang Sung-hee files us this report.
Washington's top nuclear envoy, Glyn Davies, says that it's not yet time for the heads of the six-party denuclearization talks to return to the negotiating table. Following an hour-long meeting with his South Korean counterpart Cho Tae-yong in Seoul on Tuesday, Davies said that for the talks to resume, North Korea must first work toward fulfilling its obligations.
We need to see some sign that they are sincere about what is the central issue of the six-party process, which is the peaceful denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
Davies said China's recent proposal for an informal meeting between the six-party member nations would be helpful in gathering academic opinion on North Korea, but stressed the time is not right for the top nuclear negotiators to get together. Beijing had proposed talks among experts and the highest-ranking nuclear officials from the two Koreas, the U.S., China, Japan, and Russia, on September 18th in Beijing, as part of efforts for a swift resumption of the multilateral dialogue. Seoul and Washington said that the conditions for dialogue have been clearly laid out for the North.
The actions that North Korea must take are clearly outlined in the September 19th joint declaration, in various agreements reached during the six-party talks, and in the UN Security Council resolutions.
The visiting U.S. official stressed that while Washington remains open to dialogue with Pyongyang, the talks will only take place if and when the North reverses its direction towards denuclearization. Davies will meet with officials in Beijing and Tokyo before wrapping up his three-nation visit to Northeast Asia later this week. 황성희, Arirang News.
Well, following signs earlier this year of growing cooperation with the U.S., China has been putting a greater emphasis on dialogue as a solution to the North Korean nuclear issue. And on Monday, Beijing called on nations involved in the long-stalled six-party talks on ending North Korean nuclear program to create conditions suitable to resuming dialogue.
The United States and South Korea, as our Hwang Sung-hee reported earlier in our newscast, are resolute that the North must first change its attitude before any kind of multilateral talks involving Pyongyang can take place. As of now, they say North Korea's sincerity is in question.
So what is China's stance on denuclearizing its troublesome ally, and what role can we expect Beijing to play in enhancing peace and stability in the Northeast Asian region?
Coming in the studio to provide us with some answers and some perspective is Dr. Kim Hyun-wook, professor at the Korean National Diplomatic Academy. Professor Kim, thank you for joining us again.
Thank you very much.
Now, Professor Kim, first off, tell us what exactly is China's stance towards North Korea's nuclear program and the six-party denuclearization talks?
China recently has changed its policy priority from stability in the Korean Peninsula towards a denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. But I think this is just an adjustment in its policies towards North Korea, and I think still China considers stability in the Korean Peninsula very important. I think it is still a highest priority. So currently China prefers a early resumption of six-party process. Even the United States Obama government prefers a sincere dialogue, authentic and serious dialogue with North Korea, because from the U.S. perspectives, there have been failure in its negotiation with North Korea and does not want to go to dialogue with North Korea. But China agrees upon the sincerity of North Korean position. But Chinese position is that the preconditions proposed by the United States is too high, and that preconditions would not enable six-party members to open a dialogue for the North Korean denuclearizations.
Okay, Dr. Kim, would you say that Chinese President Xi Jinping's North Korea policy is different from that of his predecessors?
Well, I think the fundamental position might be different, but the policy itself, I don't think there has not been much change. I think Xi Jinping's China is now trying to become a great power, and based upon the position of great power, they are looking at North Korea. And North Korea, which has been an important buffer state, is now at the same time simultaneously a troublemaker. So I think Xi Jinping government also, as emphasized in his summit meeting with the United States and South Korea, considers denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula very important. But I think this is just a temporary adjustment, and stability is still a very highest priority in its policy towards North Korea, because think about it, would China pursue denuclearization even though stability in the Korean Peninsula is not guaranteed? I don't think so. Some say that there has been a lot of changes, but the policy that has been shown by Xi Jinping so far does not guarantee there has been significant change in its policy.
So substantially, there's been very little, if not no change.
No, I don't think so.
Right, so China would still not risk the stability of the Korean Peninsula over denuclearization of North Korea, you're saying. Now, how does Beijing feel about the trust-building process on the Korean Peninsula?
I think basically China really liked the idea of Park Geun-hye government's trust-building policy. I mean, it is basically to open and resume a inter-Korean dialogue, even though the nuclear issue of North Korea is important. Park Geun-hye government is not, making the nuclear issue as a precondition to resume a dialogue with North Korea. So basically, Xi Jinping likes that, trust-building process. But the point is that the Korean government's trust-building politics is twofold. One, we consider dialogue important, but at the same time, we also think a deterring North Korean threat is also important. So, having said that, I think the deterrence point is something China would not like, because in order to deter North Korea, what South Korea needs is a strong U.S.-Korea alliance mechanism by way of joint military posture between the United States and South Korea. We can be very adamant and ready to deal with the North Korean threats. And China also considers that kind of U.S.-South Korea alliance as a threat to China. So that point, I think China would not like it. But basically, pursuing a dialogue, pursuing a Korean, economic community in the Korean Peninsula, in general, I think China likes that policy.
Okay, for now, we'll leave North Korea out of our equation. Let's talk about the South Korea-China relations. Where are we now? Could you give us some updates on that?
Well, the China-South Korea summit meeting between Xi Jinping and Park Geun-hye was very, very successful. I mean, Park Geun-hye requested so many things to China, and China accepted most of the demands by South Korean governments. And we have to think why Chinese posture has changed to South Korea. It begins with a Chinese Xi Jinping government change in its positions. Now China is trying to become a great power, and based upon its positions vis-a-vis the United States, China needs to do something. I mean, China needs to take some other measures that has not taken before to deter, U.S. is coming back to Asia. So in order for that, I think now China is now trying to expand its buffer state from North Korea into an entire Korean Peninsula. I mean, by making South Korea more on the side of China, I think this would be a good measure to deal with the United States. So I think for that purpose, the strategic importance of South Korea is becoming very, higher to China. And that's why Chinese, posture towards Park Geun-hye was very, fascinating. Welcomed Park Geun-hye and accepted most of the demands. Yeah.
So in order to rise as a global power, China is trying to, I suppose, embrace South Korea as well. Now, I suppose all these matter because we all know that the presence of China and the United States is quite relevant here in the Northeast Asian region. So in what ways do they flex their muscles, and how important are they?
We have to look at the notion of new type relations of great powers provided by Xi Jinping. Before, there has been a concept of responsible stakeholder, which has been the concept proposed by the Western countries. But this time, this concept of new type of great power relations has been proposed by China itself. So I think we have to think why this concept is important. Xi Jinping stated that China would not, China would not yield anything relevant to its core interests. And as far as the U.S. guarantees Chinese core interests, China would cooperate with the United States. So I think at this time, Xi Jinping is now trying to, make China into the level of great powers, but still not enough. So I think Xi Jinping's China is an interim period. Now, during the interim period, China does not want to challenge the United States because China doesn't have enough capabilities, but at the same time trying to keep their core interests so that they can raise to the, raise up to the level of the United States. So I think based upon this position of China, I think there should be more and more rivalry between the United States and China in East Asia. So what we have to consider important is that if the US and China has a very good relationship, or they have a very bad relationship, that would have a negative impact on South Korea. I mean, if they are bad, there will be another Cheonhan-ship, Yeonpyeong Island thing. We would not have our autonomous way to deal with our foreign policy. If they have good relationship, they could deal with the Korean Peninsula by their own ways. So that's something we have to be attentive to.
Right, we're seeing some glimmers, some bright spark, but still a lot of work to be done there.
Sure.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Kim Hyun-wook. We really look forward to having you again.
Thank you very much.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with heroes and experts to help you understand the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best with Moon Gun-young and Daniel Che on Early Edition at 6.
Now shifting gears to the economy, Korean import prices rose by 2 points. The Korean government is pointing to better employment figures and increased consumption as signs that the Korean economy is on a gradual recovery path. Seoul's Ministry of Strategy and Finance in its Economic Trends report said Tuesday that while Korea saw limited growth from walkouts by workers in major car companies, the number of the newly employed increased by 300,000 in July compared to the same period a year earlier. Department store sales and sales of gasoline increased by 7% and 11% respectively. The ministry said, however, that the U.S. tapering of its stimulus program remains a threat to developing nations as financial markets are expected to fluctuate, slowing down growth. Meanwhile, the United States Senate was set to vote on a bill authorizing military action in Syria this week, but that vote has now been put on hold. It was an offer by Russia to put the Syrian government's chemical weapons under international control that prompted the delay. It may have also changed the diplomatic quagmire that Syria represents. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports.
The United States says it's going to closely examine Russia's proposal of putting Syria's chemical weapons under international control.
We want to take a hard look at the proposal. We'll obviously discuss the idea with the Russians. And of course, we would welcome a decision and action by Syria to give up its chemical weapons.
In an interview with CNN Monday, President Obama said the Russians' proposal was a potentially positive development.
If we can exhaust these diplomatic efforts and come up with a formula that gives the international community a verifiable, enforceable mechanism to deal with these chemical weapons in Syria, then I'm all for it.
Russia's proposal comes in the context of imminent U.S. military action. The White House says it's important to keep pressure on Syria and give the president the authority he requested. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon plans to urge the Security Council to demand the Syrian government hand over its chemical weapons.
I'm considering urging the Security Council to demand the immediate transfer of Syria's chemical weapons and chemical precursor stocks to places inside Syria where they can be safely stored and destroyed.
Russia's proposal came a matter of hours after U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry emphasized that the only way Syria could sidestep military intervention would be to forfeit all its chemical weapons.
He could turn over every single bit of his chemical weapons to the international community in the next week. Turn it over, all of it, without delay, and allow a full and total accounting for that.
Syria's foreign minister welcomed Russia's proposal to put the country's chemical weapons stockpile under international control. but stopped short of saying explicitly if Syria would carry it out.
I state that the Syrian Arab Republic welcomes the Russian initiative, motivated by the Syrian leadership's concern for the lives of our citizens and the security of our country.
Meanwhile, the Senate has put its vote on authorizing military intervention in Syria on hold in response to Moscow's proposal. Senators were originally set to vote on Wednesday. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
And over in Japan, the nation's nuclear regulator is contradicting claims made by the Japanese government that the radiation leaks from the Fukushima nuclear plant are completely under control. Tokyo Power Electric Company has reiterated that tritium, a radioactive isotope, is leaking into the ocean and added that underwater fences installed around the plant are not capable of blocking the leaks since they are designed to only stop matter or mud from passing through. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said last week that contaminated water from the plant was not leaking into the ocean and the situation was under control.
It's been 1 year now since the conflict between China and Japan over a group of islands in the East China Sea escalated after Japan bought the islands from a private citizen. Both sides have since stepped up their rhetoric and may even be laying out plans to set foot on the islands before this year is up. Our Kim Ji-yeon takes an in-depth look at the conflict.
The territorial conflict between China and Japan over a group of islands in the East China Sea, known as Senkaku in Japan and Diaoyu in China, turned 1 year old on Tuesday. The nationalization of the islands by Japan last year took the conflict to a new level, and neither side is backing down. In fact, the Xi Jinping administration in China seems to be taking a harder line on the issue. The People's Liberation of China deployed around 40,000 Army ground and Air Force troops on Tuesday as part of a military exercise dubbed the Mission Action 2013. China wants Japan to admit that there is a dispute over the islands and to sit down for talks on the matter. But Japan has largely pushed these demands aside. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said Monday that the islands have always belonged to Japan. And now, following successive victories in the general elections last year and the upper house elections in July, Abe seems to be using his mandate to toughen his position on the islands. The Abe administration has raised its defense budget for next year, which includes a contingency plan for a potential conflict over the islands, and said it may put troops on the islands to protect them. The question of whether Japanese forces can land on the islands is a sensitive one, since the military is only allowed to engage in self-defense. With both sides stepping up their rhetoric, experts are speculating that China may set foot on the islands this year. While Chinese activists have landed on the islands in the past, there has never been an official attempt by China. However, the Chinese State Bureau of Survey and Mapping has repeatedly stated that it will send officials to the islands by the end of the year. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
No matter how bleak things may seem in life, there is always another way. Now, Tuesday marks the 11th anniversary of World Suicide Prevention Day, a day dedicated to raising awareness and preventing people from taking their own lives. It's an especially poignant day for Korea, which still has the highest suicide rate among OECD nations, a rate that has spiked in the last 10 years among teens. Our Kim Hyun-ji has more.
Lee Jin-ah is a middle school student. The 7th grader loathes the moment she gets her test results back at school. She says she cried many times alone after receiving scores she feels do not reflect her efforts.
My mom would yell at me saying, "What are you going to do with such poor test scores?" She also scolds me for not working hard enough. But I do work hard. Because of this, I always quarrel with my mom over grades.
New data show that 12% of all adolescents in the nation have had suicidal thoughts, driven by feelings of deep sorrow and anger. In 2001, the suicide rate among Koreans aged between 10 and 19 was 3.2 per 100,000 people. But the rate jumped to 5.6 per 100,000 in 2011, a near 1.8-fold increase in just 10 years. The rate of increase was the second fastest among OECD nations, following Chile. While economic hardship is the leading cause among the adult population for suicide, the biggest issues driving adolescents to the brink include academic concerns and family troubles. Less than 10% of teen suicides are linked to depression, a stark difference compared to adults, where depression is often a leading factor. To stem the growing problem among the nation's youth, experts stress that the issue of teen suicides should be approached differently than adult suicides. Kim Hyun-ji, Arirang News.
And that's all from us for this hour. Thank you for watching. This has been Daniel Chen.
And I'm Moon Gun-young. Thanks as always for being here with us. Hope you have a wonderful rest of the evening, and we'll see you right back here same time tomorrow. Good night.